This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
So who represented who? The Member of Parliament for Mukurweini constituency joins us this morning to then be able to have that conversation. MP John Kaguchia, good morning to you.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me here.
Karibu Sana, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
It's noted that your name is on the list of those who voted no to the finance bill. We'll get into the details of that in just a minute. And then what it looks like in terms of representation for Kenya's people. Before that, Dennis takes us to a very interesting country this week where the proverbs are coming from.
Yes.
And he might say, anyway, let me just allow him to continue.
Yeah. So today we're in the cradle of mankind, a country that is well known for the Turkana boy. A country that is known for the wild beast migration. Also a country that is regarded to have the only existing national park within the city. The city is regarded to be the green city under the sun. We are in Kenya. Beautiful country, right? And we're here because we can now say, Ukuni home. You know, the weather is beautiful, the people are beautiful. But let's go to the proverb. The proverb comes from the central part of the country in Mount Kenya. And it goes like this. I'm going to try not to butcher it. But it says, Oduri wa itoga dunugaga. A rich man's fat does not stink. How would you interpret it? You can.
I think it's... There's probably a Swahili one that can easily be discussed on that context. Banyani mbaya kiatu chake dawa. That someone, we were talking about the rich Indians who sometimes were not very kind to Africans, but they are the only ones who are selling shoes. Similarly here, there is a rich man who sometimes is not necessarily very friendly. And when I say friendly, it's because why are they farting in front of people or where people are? But again, because they are rich and they are probably the source of hope that you have, you just have to tolerate and just pretend like nothing is happening.
So it's excusing the rich man's bad manners because they have the chums or the paper.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So the finance bill went through the first and second reading, and then it went to the floor of the House for debate. And that House business was wrapped up real quick. And that we saw that by 9:30 p.m. on the day last week, it was all done and dusted. And that in a majority, the yes vote to pass the finance bill, taking into consideration a few edits here and there, essentially went through. 122 members of parliament, it's debated between 122 to 127, voted yes to the finance bill. 40 members of parliament voted no. The remaining number of those members of parliament were absent or abstained. Is there an indictment on parliament right now in terms of just showing up? I'm not even talking about the finance bill just yet, because I'm going to get into that. Is there an indictment of members of parliament for just showing up to represent the people of Kenya?
Indeed, it is. When you are elected, you were supposed to be in the House representing the people, unless there's a very important reason as to why you are not in the House. It's expected that you must represent your people. And the way to represent your people is to be on the floor of the House when the debate is on and make your argument, whether for or against. And again, to be there and present while voting so that you can make a vote. I've realized, though, that we have many members who may not be attending House as often as it should be, and others who are not there to make their contribution. Sometimes for fear of retribution, sometimes for fear of reprimand from their bosses and from the public. So it's an unfortunate situation. I know parliaments across the globe are not always full.
True.
But of course, sometimes they get to be full when they are very, very important debates. This one was one of them. Of course, there are a few members who never show up in the House. And that is why the electorate must also decide when they are making their vote. You must interrogate the member of parliament whom you are electing as to why they are going to the parliament. Because some parliamentarians look and seek power so that they can be able to do business. And when they get into power, they exercise that power in their business acumen, and they make sure that they are making as much as possible and never showing up in the House. I know there are some members who only showed up in the Finance Bill 2024, showed up again in Gachagua impeachment, and have not shown up again in Parliament after that. They're there. Okay. They're there. Yeah. Sometimes I actually wonder how they sign in. Yeah, someone like Sudi. You will never, ever see him in House. Never. I have only seen him in the House when he was being sworn in, never mind with a bit of trouble, when he was voting for Finance Bill, and when he was impeaching Gachagua. There is no other day you'll ever see him, unless he's a ghost. Yeah. That he appears and disappears without noticing, because I'm relatively available in the House. I'm not there 100% of the times, but I'm there more than 80% of the times. And I make my arguments on the floor. So that is a challenge. And it's not only Sudi. We have quite a number of members, actually. I remember there's a member who passed on recently. And people asking, so who is that?
Oh, wow. All amongst yourself as colleagues? Okay.
Yeah, all the people wanted to see his photo. Yeah. So we have that challenge. And
so what you're saying, I'm sorry, is that actually you're not surprised. You're not surprised that you had less than 50% of the population of members of parliament in the House on the day when the business was to vote towards the finance bill, because they don't show up anyway.
No, this was surprising, because even though they don't show up, you expected to see a better turn up on this day, because apparently
when it was critical,
it was a very critical vote, because this finance bill is seeking to raise so much money for the Kenya Kwanza government. So you'd have expected to see the members of Kenya Kwanza government who support the government from across the country. You would have expected to see them there voting.
At least on that day, kind of like how they showed up when, former Vice Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was being impeached.
Exactly. And on the other side, many of us believe that this finance bill contains very, very draconian clauses and very oppressive clauses. And for those of us who believe that, then we ought to have also been there to vote against the bill.
Okay.
But I must say that people who were against this bill were in the House relatively in a good number. I think like 96% or 95% of people who don't follow and do not support some of the policies by William Ruto government were actually in the House. I think there were very few counted numbers of people who were not there, who actually had they had excused themselves to an extent. So we had a bigger number of people who are not supporting or who are not supporting the bill.
What's an excuse that makes sense for somebody to not be in the House when such a critical piece of legislation is before debate?
Well, it depends on the person who is having that excuse. Some people sometimes are out of the country. Others are probably, like I know one member of parliament who was handling a police case. There's Wanjiko Moher, who was being sought by police for some utterances I think she had done sometimes earlier. So we had that, and I know Honorable Dininyoro had also excused himself that he was having a meeting, he was attending somewhere, I think in Botswana. So, but I think those are the only two members who were to vote against this bill who were not able to be there. But for all the other members who are supporting the bill, we first noticed on Tuesday when this bill was tabled, the members of parliament from Mount Kenya region who support William Ruto did not show up at all, except Ishungwa and Kimani Kuria and Murugara. Those are the only three members who showed up on that day. Then the following day, on Wednesday in the morning, again, they were totally absent, now including Kimani Kuria. The only member who was in from Mount Kenya region was Ishongwa, and I saw the member of parliament from Odhaya, who also did not put his card. So he was not going to make any input. He's seated at the corner at the back and was watching what is happening and what people are saying. And later on, at around 12:48, PM, when a vote was just about to be taken, I saw members trooping in. Meaning, those members were all along at the cafeteria taking tea. And they were whipped by their whip, Osoro, to come into the house. So we saw them trooping in, making a lot of noise, and of course came and took the vote. And by exactly 1:05, the House was adjourned, awaiting another session at 2:30 p.m.
If I may ask the significance of what you're saying here, is that the very debate around the matters that went into this bill, or the issues, the factors, the elements of this bill, the debate around it then was not properly executed.
It was not.
So people just came and whitewashed it with a vote.
It was not executed because when this vote was being taken at around 12:48, 12:50, to stop the debate, there were so many members who were still very interested to make their contribution in this debate, particularly members who were opposing, because we were more at this point in time.
And during the second reading?
Yeah, that is, for us now to proceed to the third reading or to the committee of the whole. Now, we were many who actually wanted to make a contribution. I had been there personally from Tuesday at 2:30. I was there up to the close of day at 6:30, at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, awaiting to make my contribution. I did not get the opportunity. I was there again the following day. And I was next online, and just when I was supposed to now be called to make a contribution, the speaker declared that now we want to stop the debate. And now members were called to come and vote. And they gladly came to vote that we stop any debate on this finance bill. And immediately they left for lunch, and now came later for the committee of the whole. Of course, now I was able to make my voice now in the committee of the whole. I did make several contributions during that time. But at the second reading is when we had sufficient time to ventilate on most of the crucial issues, at least 10 minutes at the second reading. And I felt offended that actually someone came and took a vote, someone who was not in, and then left immediately and denied me the opportunity to make a 10-minute presentation of what I had prepared on issues that I thought were contentious in this bill.
I mean, Kaguchia, that speaks a lot in terms of the leadership of the House, because then one asked the question, at the time when you were there, you had logged in, you had made your request to make your contribution. The speaker, who was in charge at the time, ought to have at least given time to everybody who was on their tablet with their request to participate. But when you talk of individuals who, first of all, were not in the House, were whipped to come in to take a vote, that speaks of a House, first of all, that has a leadership problem. Is that the case, that the leadership of the House has been captured by powers nobody knows?
I mean, that is not in question. That is not in question. I mean, that is what is happening in the Kenyan Parliament today. The leadership of the House is totally in the hands and in the pocket of the executive. And they make their bidding for executive. Sometimes they even make them fool of themselves by how they are overdoing it. Even sometimes, I'm sure when the president is seated in State House, he also wonders, how can someone get this law? And so he is able to control, manipulate, arm twist, and, remote control the parliament from where he sits in a way that really makes us very upset and very dissatisfied with that aspect. For example, I could not understand just how the debate was hurriedly stopped. And again, of course, it was done in a dramatic way as to ambush the people who would have wanted to contribute against this bill. And even they were laughing at us. Today we have ambushed you, because there was someone who had been assigned to count us. And they were counting how many members of the opposition are in the House. And the moment they realized the number was about 25 is when now they strike. And of course they were laughing about it. So they were doing this, in a dramatic way, in a way that is not right, of course, and they were doing this to ensure that they reduce any discussion and debate by members who were exposing many things that were in this bill that were not right.
Kaguchia, you're saying that almost 25 had been lined up to speak, and that you were denied an opportunity to discuss pretty much the bill at the time.
Yeah.
Does it mean, therefore, that proper discourse on this finance bill from pretty much members of the House was denied, that there was no proper engagement and contribution to this bill before getting
it
to the
was
committee
not
of the
only
whole House?
denied but also obstructed.
Okay.
Even members who did get an opportunity to make their contribution, especially if you're making your contribution against this bill, you were not given time to ventilate onto the issues freely. Anytime a member who was going to make a discussion or a point, they had set people who would object them on points of order, unnecessary, unsubstantiated points of order. On the side, when, for example, people who are seated on the side where we were critiquing this bill, when you stood on a point of order, even when you did mention the point of order that you're standing on, again, you are ignored. But when then, on the other side, they stood on a point of order, which they did not even point out which order they were standing on, they were still given an opportunity to go ahead and disrupt. Some of them would even force what they call the point of information. And point of information must be accepted by the person who is being given information. And sometimes we were forced to receive and to get information. Someone like Majority Leader, for example, was making debate on this bill after every 5 minutes. And you wonder, why should this be allowed? I mean, if as a Majority Leader, you make your contribution of 10 minutes, and that should be sufficient. You can't keep on clarifying on the floor of the House after every single member who is opposing this bill stands, and you disrupt them and get other people to disrupt them on the floor. And of course, I saw one of the media houses reporting that the opposition was disorganized. And that is what that is what we have a problem with sometimes with our journalism, because if you are a journalist and you are following what was happening in the assembly, you could tell clearly that there was a cartel between the speakers who are leading this debate, Majority Leader, and then the leadership of the House in general, and a few members whom they had set up from Finance Committee especially, who just stand, waste time, filibuster, and not make any meaningful contribution.
Right.
And this was being done to deny Kenyans information, facts, and impact of the finance bill to their lives in the coming days.
Let's go into some of those facts and
Yeah.
the impact of the finance bill.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, all these theatrics, whereas they may seem like they were a bit annoying to certain people, is part of the game, isn't it? Filibustering and all of this denying folks an opportunity to speak happens everywhere. But had you been given an opportunity to speak, and I do agree that to an extent these theatrics actually do stop important debate from making its way into the open arena. What was your understanding of the finance bill, and what were some things then that were very clear in your mind that would make you vote no?
Let me start by laying some ground on the finance bill so that Kenyans can understand where we are coming from. We passed a budget, or the National Assembly did pass a budget just a week earlier before this finance bill was presented in House. I'm sure you did let your listeners understand how much is in this budget in terms of the total amount of money that is supposed to be spent from this budget. It is 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings. Of course, the highest budget that we have had. How much is being collected, or how much is projected to be collected in terms of revenue from the taxpayers in this budget of 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings? It is 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings. How much are we collecting this year? 2.6 trillion. So what does that tell you? We expect, or the country expects to collect, or Treasury, Finance Minister expects to collect up to 1 trillion extra from what was collected this year in the coming 1 year. Now, that 1 trillion does not include the 1.2 trillion deficit that is in that budget. So first of all, you do just understand that that budget has, for all practical reasons, it has a deficit of about 2.2 trillion, not actually 2 trillion. We need to understand that. Now, just when this budget has been passed, and it has a hole on revenue, expected and projected revenue of 1 trillion Kenya shillings, then a finance bill is presented, which has cross-cutting measures on how to collect revenue. Don't you see the government is targeting to collect this 1 extra trillion Kenya shillings using this particular finance bill, even though what they are declaring, which to me, I believe is deceptive, is 118 billion Kenya shillings. Because I was saying this finance bill is expected to be collecting 118 billion Kenya shillings. But when you look at the budget itself, it tells you a different story. It gives you actually 1 trillion Kenya shillings. So you need to understand this finance bill from that perspective first. And that is a very important foundation for any argument that is made on this finance bill. Now, when we were on the floor of the assembly, you could hear the majority leader and the chairman of finance committee from time to time pointing out that this finance bill is lowering taxation from Kenyans, and it is saving Kenyans. It is giving them reliefs. You heard them make those pronouncements from time to time, as if trying to tell Kenyans that this finance bill is friendly, is good, and it is not going to hurt you at all. But on the other hand, the budget is giving you 1 trillion gap. So I needed our viewers to listen to that first. I mean, to understand that first, so that then they understand that these revenue-raising measures by government were not coming in vain, and were not coming to relieve them anything. Now, let's go to clause 31 of this bill.
Okay.
It had quite a number of items that was removing from zero rating to exemption, right? And this is part of what was presented in the bill. Never mind, in the report, when it comes to the issue of amendment, just a handful of those items were returned back to zero rating. Now, why is it wrong to remove items from zero rating to exemption? It means that once an item is zero rated, it is being taxed at zero. So any person who is manufacturing that product, or any person who is selling, retailing, or anything, is able to claim back their 16% VAT input. But when it is exempted, it means that everything you put into input tax is not claimable. So that item will definitely be much more expensive with 16% of the VAT. And that ends up making items much more expensive. What were some of these items that were in this zero-rated and exempt category? We have animal feeds, which unfortunately in the final amendments, I do not think that was removed from from exemption back to zero rating, because it was being pushed from zero rating to exemption. Now, if you do this, how does this impact Kenyan farmers? It means that animal feeds, which are already extremely expensive and out of reach, and making Kenyans are not able to farm profitably, are now going to be more expensive than earlier and than before.
Okay.
Now, if you are a true patriot and someone who is supporting production in this country, how would you then be supporting that particular clause? That on itself is horrible.
Enough. Okay, I'd like us to take a quick break and then come back and look into this. Because the indictment also on those who were against the bill is that there was not a full understanding of what it said. And then it was very difficult for anybody to then debate from a lack of information standpoint or a lack of knowledge standpoint. And that's why we're looking into some of these things. That when you voted no, was it also just the same political ploy as the folks who voted yes? And the bigger question in terms of what it does mean for representation of Kenyans moving forward. The Honourable John Kaguchia is the Member of Parliament for Mukurweini constituency. He's with us this morning. We'll come back and continue this conversation in just a bit. Don't go away.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Exactly, not go through this bill to convince the House, to convince the movers of the bill that they understood it. Is there any truth to that?
The government side did put up that narrative and have tried to sell that narrative very much. And one of the ways they were trying to push for this narrative is by ensuring that members are not able to make their contribution on the floor of the assembly. by too much disruption. And those disruptions were meant to just make that impression. Members of the opposition did understand very well and very clearly on the provisions and not even issues that were raised. And the kind of contribution they made in the National Assembly were also very good. But of course, what happened is that the government side would pick one or two issues that maybe a member either got wrong or could not give the clauses. This is not an exam. No. It is not a term paper one was writing. And so when you have gone through the bill and you have seen the issues that you have a problem with, and then you're also relying on also the analysis of experts, you may not always substantiate every single, clause, especially like a member who is coming from the finance committee. Finance committee are the people who spend so much time with this finance bill right from the word go, and unity starts quite early. They spend so much time with it, and so they know exactly what clauses are where at what point in time. So it's not always that when you go to the floor of the assembly, then you must always quote every single clause. But once you have delivered your point, then that is good enough. If the member of the National Assembly from the other side is not satisfied with what you have raised, all they just need to do is to rebut. But in this case, what we were seeing is the people going out of their way to try and belittle the members who are opposing the finance bill. This does not in any way make the finance bill good and okay. And that is why it started by raising the issue of the deficit that the government is trying to raise this last year. 1 trillion revenue increase. So anyone who is coming to tell you that, because so-and-so could not quote the clause, then this finance bill is okay.
Kaguchia, because when you talk about the second reading where members of parliament then were giving their contribution on the same, is because, correct me if I'm wrong, when you get to the committee of the whole house is where the house then goes to clause by clause and the relevant amendments throughout the entire bill. That at the second reading, it is not important that you quote the clause. It is at the third reading then that you go through each and every single clause and make the necessary amendments. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
That being denied an opportunity then to raise your issues at the second reading because you've not quoted the relevant clause is neither here nor there.
Good. If you look at the arguments which were made, it were made on the points that were made in the second reading.
Yeah.
I hope you followed the ruling by the Speaker at the point when he said that no amendment would be allowed when you go to the Committee of the Whole. What was the government side telling you? That if you have a problem with this finance bill, you are in this house, make your argument and wait for the amendments. Bring your amendments. But again, they come and tell you that Article 114(2) of the Constitution does not allow you to make any amendments to the finance bill because it's a revenue-raising measure, unless you have consulted with the Treasury and the Committee of Finance. I remember I had put 6 amendments in December 2024 for some of the clauses that were being returned back into finance bill. And they were rejected, all of them, based on Article 114, sub-Article 2, where they said that you cannot alter the revenue-raising measures by government. Now, having said that, let me come to your point precisely. You have said that one ought not to have quoted the exact clauses when you're doing the second reading. And that really is the case. It's not a must that you must quote the clause. In any case, remember, at the point when you were doing the second reading is also when the report was tabled. An 800-page document was tabled when we are on the floor. The committee ought to have tabled this report 1 week. We interact with it for 1 week or even more, and then we have the debate. But now someone has tabled a report for you, 800 pages. You are on the floor. You have prepared your points. And every time you stand, they are referring back to the That's when you had members saying, no, you cannot push me into debating your report, which I have not even set my eyes on.
Okay.
I don't even know what you are amending.
Okay.
I am debating the bill because that is what at least we have on the floor.
Okay.
And so many times you would hear interruption and distractions on the members of government side asking us to quote and the report in areas where they had made the amendments. How would you know what they have amended?
How long have you had this material as
It has
members
been,
of parliament?
the report had just been tabled when we were actually doing our debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long had you had the bill?
No, the bill was there for some time.
How long?
And largely, if you listen to the arguments that members were making, I think the bill, you had the bill more than a month.
More than a month you
yeah,
had the bill.
Yeah.
So you were clear on the issues according to the bill that needed to be addressed when it was up for debate. What the issue was this report where particular amendments had been made as a result of public participation or on their own recognizance? Which were we looking at here?
You see, what the government has been doing, and I'm sure you have seen this trend, the first draft of the finance bill they release, it normally has a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of clauses that sometimes are not adding up and clauses that they do not intend to push up to the end. So then what they do, when they bring the green paper, they will have dropped some of those proposals. I hope you understand what I'm saying. They will bring proposals which are, outrageous. Like, you remember when Kalonzo Musyoka was raising the issue of was it the Mitumba or what was this issue that he raised? There's an issue Kalonzo Musyoka did raise, and very fast, majority leader and the government side were very quick to criticize him that he has raised something that is not in the finance bill. That was actually in the first draft, and they put a number of issues in the first draft, then they release it. Then you people capture and you say, no, this is bad. And then when you start talking about them, they will have removed them. Then they tell you, show us where it is on the final bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying very clearly here, Kaguchia, is that there seems to have been a fox game here.
Mind games.
Well, think about what a fox does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereby it was very clear that there were certain issues that would come up in the bill, which it could not be risked to be brought out onto the floor for debate, because then it would be clear that it did not hold any water. But if we look at the bill in its entirety, if you were to give an overview of the issue with the bill and why it needed to be rejected in its entirety, what I hear you kind of saying is that, number one, it increased expenditure, and the manner in which it increased expenditure was going to be detrimental to the Kenyan's pocket at a micro level. Would that make sense?
Even at a very, not only micro, but even in a broader sense. I want to bring your attention to the clause, for example, that is bringing something called pre-populated tax. Pre-populated tax is whereby someone will follow your phone, will follow your account, will follow your e-teams and all your financial activities, behind your back. And then when they know how much it is that you earn or you're collecting or has gone through your hands, will demand for a certain amount of tax from you. For example, they will say, we see you have not paid as much tax as you have handled this amount of money. Never mind even if the money was welfare, groups or whatever it is. And then they will tell you, we want you to pay us this percentage, let's say like 5%, of that amount of money in terms of tax, and that is part of the pre-populated tax. And then they put the burden of proof to you as a person that you have to prove that you ought not to pay tax on these amounts. And then you saw the Draconian clause again that had been introduced, that if, for example, the money that has passed through your hands and pesos and all that is about, let's say, in a year is maybe, let's say, like 10 million, and the amount of money now the government is asking you to pay is, let's say, 1 million shillings in terms of taxation, and then you say you can't pay that money because it's really not part of what you should pay for tax. And the government, KRA, takes you to takes on you, gives you an agency notice,
Mm-hmm.
and then you decide to go to court. Government is telling you, you must first pay the 1 million we have claimed on you, even if you have not proved it. You must first of all place 1 million here with us, then go to court.
Right.
If you win in the court, we'll return back the money to you. If we are not able to return back the money to you for one reason or the other, we can reduce this one from your future tax credit. It can become a tax credit and reduce it from you in the future.
It sounds like a game.
You know, it's so draconian.
Okay.
That and then you see members of the Kenya Kwanza government side actually dying on the floor to support this clause.
Which political party are you affiliated with, John?
I am affiliated to DCP.
You're a DCP party member.
I'm not a party member of DCP in terms of I'm not elected through DCP, but I'm affiliated. My thinking.
What is
my mind?
Your party membership at the moment?
Of course, I was elected through United Democratic Alliance.
UDA, okay.
Yeah.
In 2024, you voted in favor of the finance bill. Where are some of these games that you talk about today? What played then?
We have learned our lessons.
You knew.
Yeah, we have.
Even hang on. I can't. You can't answer a question I haven't asked. So, in 2026, these games that you talk about, which you've clearly told us how they go, you knew the script in 2024 because it would be argued that even when this was debated, just as quickly as it was in 2026, the same thing happened in 2024, which put the country in a lot of a mess after when it was then now contested. So in 2026, having known that you're going to battle with the same mechanism that was used 2 years ago, how should you then have handled this better? Because you were on the other side then. If you fought on the other side...
The issues have changed greatly.
The issues have changed,
the circumstances
but
have changed.
The modus operandi, from your admission, is the same.
Yeah, it's the same. I want to, for example, bring the issue of numbers in the House.
Okay.
You know very well that members of ODM crossed the floor. Okay? The two main parties in Parliament is ODM and UDA. ODM crossed the floor. They are now working with the president. What does that tell you? 80 or 85% of Parliament is working with the president in the broad-based government. And that gives the president unprecedented power in the assembly.
Okay.
He has sweeping powers. So the members who have remained on this other side or who crossed the floor from the UDA are minimal. Then you have the wiper members who are also few in the House. And we have a very few members of ODM who did not cross the floor with the others to join the broad-based government. So you have just about 40-something members in the National Assembly. And if you remember, even in the Gachagua impeachment, it's only 52 members who did not impeach Gachagua. From the 52, the number has again dropped with about 10 members. So the members who are there now to raise the voice against the broad-based government draconian bills and policies is a thin number. And so the strategies that, for example, were used, and that would be used, are also limited because a number of 42 against so many members in Parliament, that is more than 300, actually, I think 307, 307 or so, is because we have 349 members minus the 42. You find that is also not an easy task. And so we really have to put up a case anyway so that our voice is known and the public can understand. And it's very important that you have the alternative voice. Otherwise, William Ruto will just get right into your bedrooms and kitchens and take everything without your knowledge.
Kaguchia,
Yeah.
as we talk about the House there is today, if you look at the purpose of the House, whether in what exactly Parliament should be, there's really no opposition or government MPs. We just have members of Parliament whose role purpose is legislation oversight and representation. Are we therefore saying today that members of Parliament as is structured have forgotten their real purpose to be in that House where it is to oversight, to represent and to legislate, that today they are playing wings, they are bowing to the executive for one reason or the other? Because at the end of the day, members of parliament as a whole should be looking at the business on the floor of the House with the mwananchi at the back of their mind.
I think with most members of parliament knowing that they will go home, clearly, they now follow much more where they are getting their pay. Ordinarily, members of parliament should be more inclined towards their bosses, who are their electorate. But I doubt that is happening anymore.
Yeah.
How would you say they are following their electorate when, for example, on the same day, on Wednesday, on Tuesday, we had the appropriations bill 2, which was appropriating so much money to the executive to spend within the last 2 weeks of the financial year.
Yeah.
I mean, 200 million was being appropriated to Deputy President's office.
To spend in this period that we are sitting in,
They were voting 1 billion Kenya shillings to go to State House. They were voting 3.55 billion Kenya shillings to go to unaccounted for fund by NIS. They were voting 1.55 billion to go again to unaccounted vote for the CS Interior. If you look at that much, it's 6.3 billion Kenya shillings to be spent like Peremende in the last 2 weeks of the financial year. Now, this is happening, and then, by the way, I'm on record. At least this one, I did put up a very serious opposition too, and I was able to explain myself at this point in time. In fact, the leadership didn't know that I had all those details because I was quoting them, even the vote number, because they kept on disrupting. And by the way, within the same 2 last weeks, they increased our debt capacity, borrowing capacity with 17 billion Kenya shillings
without the acquiescence of Parliament.
Of course, I mean, it was in that supplementary 2 budget. Many members of Parliament didn't see that. I raised it; it's on record. And when I raised this, Ishongwa was very quick to rise on a point of order to disrupt me and say, "Oh no, we are not debating the first supplementary. We are not," just to try and lose me. But I stayed put. I stayed put. And I put across my point. It's unanswered. It's on record.
Kaguchia, how would you explain the fact that I don't have a problem with members of parliament who showed up to vote either way. I have a problem with members of parliament, both from opposition and from government side, who did not show up to cast their vote. What message does that send? Is it because people are afraid to be seen on how they voted for the finance bill because of the 2027 election?
Yeah, of course. But again, also most of them are also fearing Gen Zs. They are fearing that they might come for their lives again. So the members of parliament who did not vote did not do this because they understand the ramifications of this. They want to support their boss, the president. But again, they are at pain that it's too late in the day. Some of them, I know, there are many clauses there that were raining against their own businesses. I know, like some members of parliament who do business, and I know because I heard them talk about clauses that were so negative that are likely even to bring down their businesses.
And that's why they would vote against them, not for other people.
You'd expect them to vote against this finance bill, but they couldn't. First, because they fear the president. They fear that he will be on their case. And this is something that has surprised me, that you can be elected. The president is elected just like a member of parliament. How then would you fear him so much that you do not want to represent your people because of fear? And so some of them are going to have their businesses fall. I saw, for example, one member there who was trying to lift his hand up, very enthusiastically when some of the clauses came up, and he was trying to oppose, but he could not be allowed to oppose the clauses on the floor because, again, that isn't that reading now, because the speaker had already ruled that you cannot amend the finance bill because it goes against the Article 114. So when you hear the government people tell us that, you're in opposition, you're supposed to be in parliament saying what you're saying about the finance bill, they are also very cunning in terms of what you can amend and what you cannot amend. But again, what you do is you must raise your voice so that Kenyans can understand. And when they understand, then they walk with you and they also raise their voice at the end of the day.
Indeed.
And that is why, again, as we finish, I want to remind Kenyans that government expects to collect 1 trillion more this year. This finance bill that was passed is expected to help the government
collect more money
to do that.
I think it's interesting that 6.3 billion shillings has been approved by the same parliament to then be able to spend in the next, we're looking at 8 days now. My goodness. Sometimes we have a cliffhanger, and I think that's where we are now in terms of really the role of Parliament and some of the antics, unfortunately, that were captured by. And I guess we're using the word captured.
Yeah.
The Member of Parliament for Mukurweini constituencies, John Kaguchia. Thank you for being here with us this morning, shedding light on some of these issues. It's all one to watch and see. Asante Sana. Good morning at 8 a.m.
The latest. This is the Situation Room. The only way to